Good morning, everybody. You guys look fantastic. You look great. Thank you guys for joining us. My name is Lloyd Cambridge. I'm the director for NYC Business Solutions Center, and my colleague to my right.
I'm Erica Dorn. I'm also a consultant with the Department of Small Business Services at the Lower Manhattan Small Business Solutions Center.
So thank you guys again for joining us. We look forward to really sharing some dynamic information with you guys today. So really quickly, NYC Business Solutions is a city program under the Department of Small Business Services. And our job is really to support you guys, right? And how do we do that? We support you guys by providing a set of no-cost services, which you guys see right here, to help you to operate, start, and expand your businesses. So everything from legal services, if you need to talk to an attorney at no cost about various kind of legal matters, to financial assistance, which we're going to delve in a little bit today. So we act almost as a broker, and we have relationships with banks, credit unions, alternative lenders, and our job is to connect you to the appropriate financial institution, essentially, that matches your profile, if that makes sense. And we've also launched a really exciting program called Fuel Your Dream, and essentially this program assists you guys in being able to leverage crowdfunding, which Erica is going to talk a little bit about today. Did I miss anything, Erica?
I think you got it. It sounded great.
Cool. All right. So next. So I'm going to jump right into it. I know you guys are all excited about equity and crowdfunding. It's a popular topic. So I'm going to kick it off and talk about friends and family. So did you guys know this stat, that 87% of startups are funded by friends and family, right? It's not a shocker there. When you look at friends and family, what you really want to look at and what's really important is that most people essentially lend or invest money into people that they actually trust, right? Does that make sense? So if you look at the word credit even, we're not even talking about investing at this point, the word credit comes from a Latin word. Anybody know what that Latin word is? It was like, no, I have no idea what that word is. Like, why would I know Latin, right? So that word is called creditum. I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. I'm pretty sure I am, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. And essentially, the word itself means to trust, right? So the word credit itself means trust, right? So your job as entrepreneurs, as business owners, is to develop trust, right? So can I develop trust with friends and family? Can I develop trust essentially with a banker or a potential angel investor or VC, right? That's your job as entrepreneurs, is to establish a foundation of trust. And how do you do that, right? So we can talk a little bit about that. Erica, you want to chime in there, talk about trust?
Beautiful.
Okay. So 87% is funded. That way, the median amount that folks raise from friends and family is about $15,000, right? You would expect it to be more than this, but I did the research. According to Babson College, you guys familiar with Babson? They do a lot of kind of one of the pioneers, I would say, in the small business development space. About $15,000 based on the survey and the research that they've conducted. Let me go back. And what I thought was really surprising as well in doing this research was that 44.5%, almost half, when you're looking to raise funds, comes from a very young demographic, right? And this demographic is between the ages of 18 and 34, right? So you would expect that you would raise funds from, older, let me say older, but folks, a little bit more advanced in age than 34. But to my surprise, it's very different. Have you had any success with any companies that you worked with in the past that have raised funds from friends and family?
Absolutely. And it just depends on, at what stage you are in your business. So a lot of businesses might first start by raising money from family where, the age isn't important. But I think if you're talking about crowdfunding platforms, generally it's a younger demographic that's coming to fund your business. Is this fact, just in terms of this fact, this is across the board?
This is across the board.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
haven't seen that.
I thought it was cool too.
Yeah.
All right. So now I want to kind of give you guys a process. I'm really big into process management. I think a lot of companies don't do well, for a variety of different reasons. But one of the reasons is that there's a lack of process management, right? So like when I talk about process, I'm talking about a step-by-step kind of guide to teach you how to kind of approach a specific situation. Does that make sense? You guys follow me? No? Yes? Okay, awesome. I need some feedback, guys. Come on. All right, so the very first step, what I need for you guys to do if you're looking to raise money from family and friends or, this is common knowledge, but the first step is to really calculate the total cost for your project, right? That makes sense, it's easy. So essentially what you want to do is create what we call an itemized list of all the different expenses that you have as it relates to what you're looking to do. Are you looking to fund, open up a new store, right? Are you actually starting a new business? Are you going to expand into a new product line, right? And what are the costs associated with that specific project, right? So create an itemized list and kind of list the expenses next to it, and you come up with the total project cost is what it's called. This is also called the uses of funds. Now I'm getting technical with the banking language, but it's called the uses of funds. And then your second step is to really determine the amount and the type of money you need or that you would like to raise from family and friends, right? So let's say, for example, as a team here, we're all going to be business owners together. We have a flower shop in, where are we, Chelsea? All right, so we're going to call it Chelsea Flowers. And we need to raise $50,000 to essentially open up a new flower shop, right? You guys are with me? So essentially, right, we might be able to raise about $20,000 from friends and family, right? So I think what a lot of business owners tend to do is they look to raise 100% of a total project cost from one specific source of funding, right? And that's something I don't want you guys to do. So I want you to consider the different types of funding that you can have from multiple sources, right? So friends and family is just one source, right? So as we're outlining our costs, we want to be able to look at this one kind of, one-liner that we're calling family and friends. We're going to raise $20,000. And there's 3 different types of financing, Erica. Did you know that?
Really?
That you can do from friends and family. The first one is, me and Erica are going to start a show together, actually, guys. We're going to start a YouTube show. It's going to be all about business, and I hope you guys tune in. But the first line is debt financing, right? So you can actually raise debt from your friends and family. That's very clear. And the benefit of debt is that you have flexibility as it relates to the terms of that debt, right? So you can subordinate debt, to banks, and banks like to see that, or alternative lenders. You can control potentially like the interest, right? So you can have an interest-only loan. If you take a loan out from your friends or family, you can have an interest-only loan for 10 years, and then have the principal being repaid after that period of time. And then you have obviously a gift. So as opposed to essentially, borrowing money from your friends or family, you can actually receive a gift from your friends or family. And the second and the last piece, the tertiary piece, is equity, right? So you can actually make a family owner or a friend a business partner in your organization, right? And is that something that you want to do? There's risk and cons with that specific structure. Did I miss anything there, Erica?
I think it's clear.
Thanks. All right. So the third step is to make a list of the friends and family that you would like to approach about your opportunity. It's really clear. So essentially what you want to be able to do is, do you want to raise that $20,000? We have the Chelsea Flower Shop. We need $50,000 to launch. From that $20,000, do we want to raise small amounts of money from family and friends over a large number of people? Or do we want to raise, let's say, two $10,000 amounts of money from like 2 different family members, right? So we have the choice of doing it between a large number of people or a small number of people. And then after that, the next step is really to create a compelling pitch and any supporting documents that will essentially support your cause or support the reasons why you're looking to raise this capital, right? So what does a compelling campaign look like? What is a compelling pitch? You want to really be able to identify how much money you're looking to raise, what's the purpose of that money, and what are the different risks involved with that money as well, right? So you want to be really transparent and authentic with your friends and family so that they really have an understanding in terms of what they're really getting involved in, right? And I know if it was me, if you're coming to me, I definitely want you to feed me, right? That's the very first thing. So I need for you to come to my house. We're going to have this one-on-one meeting and provide some food in addition to telling me about your specific project. So you can make it fun. It doesn't always have to be, because it is your friends and family, it doesn't necessarily have to be very technical and formal, but it can be a little bit more casual, which I think is a benefit to approaching friends and family. And the fifth step is, so again, you schedule these one-on-one meetings with your friends and family. Then you put together any documentation that you need to again, if they do say yes to your pitch, you need to put together the appropriate documentation, right? So if it's a gift that we spoke about before, so if we're going to raise $20,000 from our friends and family as a gift, so essentially, if your business is successful for whatever reason, your friends or family might say, hey, this gift is now a loan or equity, right? So you need to have some documentation in place so that if you are successful, that they won't come back and try to change the terms of the money that they lent you. So essentially what you need to be able to put in place is some documentation, even if it's a letter, just stating that that money that they gave you isn't actually a gift. If it's a type of debt, there's a promissory note that you need to put in place, and you can get an attorney, an accountant to essentially help you to draft that out and what that would look like. And you also want to consider the type of equity that you want to give to your family or friends. I would consider what we call non-voting stock. So essentially, non-voting stock means that if someone comes on board, they don't have the flexibility to kind of have a say in the day-to-day operations of your business, right? And you may want that. You might have an uncle who, who's really talented in social media or marketing, and that might not be your strong suit. So you might want to lean on him or her for that area of expertise. And then
I would just say there's also many templates available online to look at different types of term sheets. So you can play around and get a sense for, because you really want an entrepreneurial friendly term sheet so that it's working for you and your business. So take a look at the examples online. There really are great examples of how you could structure a term sheet with your friend or family.
Awesome. And the last piece is really, just to keep your friends and family up to date as it relates to the progress and the activity of your business. It's really simple, really clear. So you want to keep them engaged, right? And for a lot of us, you need to kind of really create a system around this. And I think the appropriate system is on a quarterly basis to really have a touch point with the folks that have actually invested or lent to you in some capacity. So whether that's an email or whether that's a phone call, you want to really structure it in a way where you're being authentic and you're engaging them in the process, right? So it's not just the money that you always are seeking, but it's also their expertise, their relationships, their different resources and assets that they might have, and you might want to do a second round of financing, right? So it's your job to really keep them engaged in the process as you're developing and growing and expanding your business. So that's pretty much it for the family and friends portion. So now we're going to move along and talk a little bit about crowdfunding.
Yeah, great. So we technically have 20 minutes, which is why we're covering an immense amount of detail in a very small period of time. Yeah. How many of you have done a crowdfunding campaign? Anyone in the room? Woohoo, one. Me too. Essentially, if you're not familiar with it, crowdfunding is a way to raise money in the same way that Lloyd was just describing, but through an online platform. So basically, this old idea of raising money through friends and family has been brought into the modern age through online platforms that's now being called crowdfunding. And it's actually been emerging, I'm sure most of you have heard of it over the last 5 years, and it's becoming a very significant way to fund your business. Actually, this year, according to Fundable, which tracks data on crowdfunding, $65 billion will be raised through crowdfunding for small businesses and projects, art projects, technically. But what's interesting about that is, wow, there's all this capital to be raised from all of us individually, this sharing economy where we can lend to each other and invest in each other's businesses. But only about 40% of the campaigns that are put online are successful. And actually, that statistic isn't so bad, considering that almost, a lot of businesses get turned away from banks as well. So 40% actually isn't so bad. And there actually are some other incentives, other reasons for doing crowdfunding beyond just getting the funding, which I'll talk about. There are right now essentially two different types of platforms to raise money online from people all over the world. And one is called gift or in-kind crowdfunding, and the other is called equity crowdfunding. To talk about gift crowdfunding, you're probably familiar with some of these like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Rocket Hub, Kiva Zip, who is here today. There's a representative. You can talk with Catherine about that platform. But essentially, and Barnraiser, which is a great platform if you're a food business. So there are thousands of these platforms, and many are dedicated to certain industries. The most well-known is Kickstarter. And I'll go into how you raise money on those platforms more specifically. But there's also equity crowdfunding, and that's right now, because of the Jobs Act, hasn't been finalized. You can only raise equity right now from accredited investors online. Hopefully one day, you'll be able to raise equity from people all over the world, your friends and family, through an online platform. But right now, that's only available, you can only do that through accredited investors who are generally high net worth individuals. But what's interesting is definitely look into these platforms. I just want to mention one of my favorite new businesses, which is called Gimlet Media. They have a podcast called the Startup Podcast, if you're into podcasts. And they're basically podcasting weekly about the process of starting a business. And their last podcast, they talk about raising equity through AlphaWorks. And so you can actually go on to AlphaWorks, check out Gimlet Media, and you can see their deck, which is a great template for how you might want to structure your deck, which should be about 10 slides. And you can see how they communicate their business and check out what it means to raise equity online. There's some others as well. Definitely check out AngelList, Crowdcube, Fundable. You can access investors online that way. But there's a lot to consider. I'm going to skip over that slide since we don't have too much time. There's a lot to consider before you decide to crowdfund. So do you want to talk about some of those, Lloyd? Or do you want me to go into it?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So one is, do you want to put your idea out to the world? Is it ready to be put out to the world? If it's an invention, or if you haven't gotten the patents that you need, the legal support that you might need, you might want to wait to launch a crowdfunding campaign and expose your idea. So just something to think about there. It's not like you just put a campaign online and it's successful. It actually has a lot to do with your own personal networks. Or if you have the type of business that's, for example, a video gaming business that has a huge online community that's just ready to, jump on your crowdfunding campaign. Most of the businesses that are raising money online, majority of your momentum is really going to come from your own networks. And I mentioned digital platforms, but I want to include email in that. When you launch your campaign, you're going to use all of the different platforms to get your messaging out there, and you're going to try different types of messages. But your core way to reach your target funders and backers is probably going to be through old-fashioned email. So consider, and I'll get into how you can effectively communicate through email. As Lloyd mentioned, you definitely want to be specific about what funds are being used for. So, for example, I had a client recently who was really wanting to raise the full amount of funds for a restaurant, $100,000 online for a new restaurant. Well, that's a very difficult ask. You actually want to be more specific than that. You want to say, I've launched my restaurant, and we're actually going to be expanding with a new pizza oven in the back. Something very specific that actually is much more sticky to potential backers when you have a specific ask like that. Otherwise, it's too big, too broad, and not as engaging. And actually not as realistic is really the issue. And then, as Lloyd mentioned, just to harp on that, definitely there's a whole spectrum of funding options available to you, and you want to consider what are the different, how can you orchestrate different funding at the same time? So you could use something like Fundbox, which is a way to get cash through your accounts receivables in conjunction with crowdfunding, and potentially approach a bank for a line of credit. So always be keeping your eye out for potential funding options. And huge thing, do you have time to run a crowdfunding campaign? Because it's essentially a small business within your small business for up to 4 to 6 weeks. It takes an immense amount of time to be successful, and most businesses that are raising that money, it's you, the entrepreneur, that's going to spend all of your time. I would say up to a third or a half of your time could be spent per week while the campaign's active on really trying to make it successful. So things to do while you're planning. Create your messages and test them. Let me give an example. I had a client recently who wanted to raise online, and she was using a message that, help my business, it's been destroyed by Sandy. And we tested that message, and it just wasn't resonating at this point in time. So we changed the messaging to, we're ready to expand, we need you to be a part of it. So figure out what message is actually going to resonate the best, and how can you test that? Well, you could send an email to a few friends and ask them how that resonates. You can test it through early Facebook messages to see how many likes you get. Just talk to people, talk to Lloyd or I, and other friends and family or marketing specialists obviously can have a big insight into what messages are going to work. And craft your incentives. So I ran a crowdfunding campaign a few years ago, and we spent a lot of time. It was successful. We had a lot of PR that was exciting. But we spent so much time just researching other campaigns to see how they were successful, and that helped us, we believe, become more successful. So just to how we priced each incentive, starting at $1 or $5, or should we start at $9 or $15? Most of our funding came through the $50 range, and attaching the type of, we did goodie bags, and we did, we invited people to events. We had different incentives that we offered. and we researched them heavily. So I actually created a spreadsheet as I was doing it to kind of match up all these different ideas. You want to treat it as a research project. Take it seriously on how you price your incentives. You create, and this is, I'm by the way talking about specifically raising money through Kickstarter, right? Because you're offering in-kind gifts in exchange for capital. In terms of your story and your video, you generally do want to get a professional who's to do your video if you can, and write your story out ahead of time. Practice. A lot of people were not always comfortable on camera right away, so you want to practice, being comfortable in front of the camera before you shoot your video. And I mentioned choose your email platform. So you're going to be emailing a lot. Probably once a week, you'll send a blast out to your community. Don't overblast them. You can get what's crowdfunding fatigue essentially. But you can use something like MailChimp, which is free, or what do you use, Lloyd?
I use MailChimp, but there's also Constant Contact. AWeber is another one.
I'm sure many of you, but check. We have a client recently who's using this MailChimp for the first time, and his emails aren't coming out so great. So practice, and he's sending them to the masses. So I would just suggest practicing your mail strategy ahead of time. And then in terms of crafting your social media messaging, I want to mention that when you're raising, let's say $20,000 for your flower store, in the first week, you want to get 30% of that funded right away. Because most projects that are successful fund 30% in the first week. So ways you go about that. You don't launch on day one to everybody you know, because you first want to get some momentum for your project. So you start with probably your core, let's say 100 people in your network that you send an email to. And you've probably spoken to at least half of them over the last 6 weeks while you were preparing your campaign. So most people know you're about to launch, they're excited, and you've engaged them. When you reach out to that first round of people, you want to get them to fund 30% of your business in that first week. And so you tried to line that up ahead of time. So are you in for 1,000? Are you in for 500? Get them in early on. And give them sample tweets, sample Facebook messages. So make their jobs easier. If you're asking them to evangelize and be ambassadors for your campaign, make it really easy for them. So prepare some tweets ahead of time, and you can test that messaging with them as well. So try a few different messaging taglines that you give out to your community. And so it's very important to have these ambassadors and consider them part of your team. Are they really on board to help you meet your goal? Definitely reach out to press and bloggers. So when I ran a crowdfunding campaign, one day I was just at work and I got an email, and Good Magazine promoted our campaign to their entire network. They didn't even reach out to us. They actually just found us on Kickstarter. That's lucky. Usually you have to do a lot of outreach ahead of time. And again, if you haven't done outreach to PR, with press, you need to test the right messaging to make sure it resonates with your specific bloggers. But do expect that if you run a crowdfunding campaign that you'll get picked up in some blogs. And that's a great outcome of running the campaign beyond getting funded. Ideally, there are times where New York or someone else will also pick you up, because that's going to make your chances of being successful much greater. So expect, and ahead of time, reach out to press, because especially neighborhood press, like DNA Info is a great example of a publication that would probably pick up a local story on a crowdfunding business. So just to give you a sense, you could create essentially a whole document, a dashboard about each section of your campaign. You really want to think of it as a business and think, who are the bloggers? Who are my ambassadors? What are my incentives? How much am I going to get from my friends and family in that first week? What are the messages? So, create that business plan essentially for your crowdfunding campaign. And a lot of successful campaigns have events kind of offline to help get more energy. So, to give you a quick example, if you don't mind pulling up I have a crowdfunding platform campaign that's raising right now. You may notice that there are 17 days to go and there are only 3,000 funded. This is a really cool business. It's a client at Small Business Solutions called XXX Coffee. The campaign is not over, so here's my advice. We suggested that you try to raise 30% in the first week. Well, this campaign hasn't yet. But there are campaigns that will be able to reach that goal by the end, and here's what they have to do. They have to keep iterating their message. They have to try new networks with new language that might pick up. And they also, if you want to scroll down, they might want to add new types of incentives. So XXX, because people weren't picking up on it, they've added daily new incentive, or actually not daily, but every few days a new incentive, and then they blast that out. So that might pick up more people as well. So you want to keep iterating. You don't give up. There's still hope, and maybe some of you will fund this campaign because it does need some help. But here's the beauty of it. They have been picked up in a lot of press. So even if this isn't successful, for them it's actually been pretty successful. They've done a lot of work to hone in their messaging. They've created great products that they might use for other programs, and they might try this again and be highly successful, and they've learned a lot along the way. But this is essentially Kickstarter if you all haven't seen it, and these are the different incentives that they thought carefully about pricing, but for whatever reason it hasn't been successful yet. But again, there's still time. So you can go back to and they did have a couple of events as well. So I did mention keep iterating, keep hoping that you will be successful if you're not. But you will be successful if you do it right, if you price it right, if you structure if you try to raise the right amount, and you do a lot of planning, your chances of success are much, much greater. Yes, and get creative. It'll be exciting to see how creative you can get through a crowdfunding campaign. And once you launch and you're successful, those networks are with you forever. So good luck. I hope we did our quickest version of equity and crowdfunding ever. But thanks.